Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. With self-care strategies from Chinese medicine, functional medicine, Ayurveda, neuroscience, and beyond. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and transformation catalyst, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Brody Welch, a licensed acupuncturist and a holistic health catalyst. And right now, if you're listening in real time, we are in the midst of the COVID-19 self-quarantine era. At least we are in most of the country. And it's a time that has been rife with uncertainty, unease, stress. It's a time when many of us are stress eating, stress baking, and where memes are circulating about wearing masks indoors to prevent us from just eating anything at any hour. There's been a run on flour, and yeast is a precious commodity in grocery stores. So I thought it would be useful to invite on the show my friend and emotional eating expert, Tricia Nelson. Tricia is someone I met a few years back, and I was really impressed with her and her story. She lost 50 pounds by identifying and healing the underlying causes of her own emotional eating, and has spent over 30 years researching the hidden causes of addictive personality. She's the author of a #1 bestselling book, Heal Your Hunger: 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. And she also hosts a popular podcast called The Heal Your Hunger Show and is a highly regarded speaker. She's been on NBC, CBS, Fox, goes on. And I'm just delighted to have her here with me to talk about just some strategies for not eating the house during this self-quarantine or whenever we may be encountering emotional eating. Tricia, welcome to the show.
I'm so happy to be here and to really have this opportunity to talk about this really killer, that's a terrible word, topic to bring to people. So thank you so much for having me. I can't believe I just used that word. Sorry about that.
You know, and nobody's perfect. And I'm sure that we can all listen with kindness and realize that we're all on the same team here, and that there's no such thing as a perfect conversation, much as our president would have us believe. I'd love for you to start off with just sharing your own story and how it led you to where you are now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to, because that's really how it did all start. I was an emotional eater, I think, from the get-go, Brody. I like loved food. I loved to cook. I loved to eat. I loved to serve it to people. And it was really just one of those things that just brought me so much happiness. And I thought it was just a case of liking food. Like I thought, well, I just like food. But at some point, my sister discovered she was an emotional eater, and she used those words, emotional eater. And I didn't think a lot of my sister. We had a lot of tension. So I thought, that's just really stupid. That's why I passed it off. And then, when your consciousness is raised, you start to notice things. And sure enough, I started to really, as much as I repudiated that idea of emotional eating, I started to notice how emotional my eating was, in that, like, when I was sad, I'd be eating. When I was stressed, I'd be eating. And it was just always my go-to. And so I started getting really sort of clued into the idea that, yeah, it's not just that I like food. I am an emotional eater. And unfortunately, I was an overeater and a binge eater as well. And so I would go on these binges where I would get my favorite binge foods, and I'd sit and watch TV and feel sick after, and, after eating so many different kinds of foods. And so by the age of 21, I was 50 pounds overweight and really unhappy about my weight. And I had this roll on my tummy that I would scrunch up, and I would just kind of try to think of really violent things to do to my body. Because there was this roll of fat in my tummy, how on the fat on the side of a steak, you can just slice off. And I'm like, well, if it's just fat, maybe I can cut this off. Or I thought about getting some disease, which, is a very violent thought, where I would automatically lose weight, or joining the army, where I'd be forced to go through boot camp, because I hated exercise. So these crazy, crazy thoughts I was thinking about my body, because I felt so out of control. And no matter what diet I tried, I could lose weight from here and there, but I was a yo-yoer, and ultimately I would put the weight back on and then some. So I had about 5 different sizes of pants in my closet, depending on which weight I was at the time. So, it was very not normal. And it was definitely by the time I was in my mid-20s that I was seeking deeper solutions. So I'd done diets, I'd done pills and potions and lotions and exercise programs and so many different things. But I really came to a place where when somebody finally clued me in, like, to the fact that there were deeper underlying emotional causes, and that's what needs to be addressed, that's when I started getting real help. So that's what my work is born out of. Heal Your Hunger is really about healing the deeper hunger, the emotional hunger, the soul hunger, the spiritual hunger that we really have, that we're trying to feed with food.
I really have a lot of empathy for your story. It's like I've had similar self-hating body thoughts about my stomach as well, and have certainly been. Well, I feel like in a lot of my life, food has been not an easy relationship, and
Hmm.
certainly, like at one point I was probably 40 pounds heavier than I am now, and a
Okay.
lot of that being kind of hormonally driven, but also being someone who really likes food and who really values food and healthy eating and all this. But at the same
Hmm.
time, like, which I think almost makes the line harder to draw between when it's coming from an emotional place versus, like a legitimate grounding activity, or something that is actually nourishing.
Yeah.
How can you help us draw that line? Because obviously, eating is something wonderful that and healthful and nourishing. It's not something that emotional eaters can just stop eating, like addicts of drugs or alcohol have the choice to maybe
Right.
not use those things. It's like that people who have addictive relationships with food, not eating is not an option. And
Right.
and I know that actually that you use the terms emotional eating and food addiction as as two separate phenomena. Is that true?
Yeah, and the reason why, and first of all, it's so true. Like with food, you can't just put the plug in the jug, So I always say it's the hardest addiction to overcome because you have to eat 3 times a day. You got to take the roaring tiger out of the cage, pet the kitty, and put him back in the cage, and expect him to be happy. So it's a lot more treacherous than other addictions, I think, because of that one element where you have to literally deal with it every day for life. Double meaning there, for life. But I say food addiction and emotional eating in different ways, sometimes interchangeably and sometimes not, because I really feel like we're all emotional eaters to some degree. I think we're wired that way, to have an emotional connection with food so that we'll enjoy it, and we're meant to enjoy it. And so that emotional connection will keep us eating, and I think that's just sort of how our body design started, because that way we'd want to eat and we'd subsist as a species. So that's there, and there's nothing wrong with getting that enjoyment from food and even comfort from food. So I always say it's really a spectrum of emotional eating, and on the low end is just enjoying food and maybe eating a little extra or a couple extra cookies or whatever because it's so yummy. But on the high end of the spectrum is all out food addiction, where it's a real addiction. And the difference in how you know where you are on that spectrum really has to do with control and consequences. And so on the low end of the spectrum is somebody who has control. Like they can eat extra or go on a cruise, when we're cruising, go on a cruise and eat too much, gain 5 pounds, and come back and be like, okay, that's it, back to my routine, and they're going to the gym and they're taking care of themselves and dropping that 5 pounds. And that's kind of a normal type of situation of an emotional eater. But on the high end is somebody, that's somebody who's got control and they have very few consequences. Okay. But on the high end, you've got very little control, where somebody gains 5 pounds but feels so disgusting about themselves they fall into that slump of bad behavior and food choices. And it goes on for weeks, and it turns into 10 pounds and it turns into 15 pounds, because the more depressed they are about their weight, the more they eat to console themselves, which of course makes no sense, but that's what we do. That's what I did. It's sort of like getting on the scale and hating what it says and using that as a reason to eat. So the high end is where you have very little control to stop or to pull back or to course correct, and you're piling on consequences where it's really making a difference in your weight. It's maybe making a difference in your job performance or your mental health. You're getting depressed, your hygiene's going down the toilet, and you could go as far as having suicidal thoughts because you're just in such darkness. And that's where I went with it. So it is a spectrum, and that's why I differentiate, between the emotional eating and the food addiction. It's different places on the spectrum.
That makes sense. Like anything, there is a question of degree, and yet for people who might find themselves under stress, under more stress than usual, perhaps right now, and confined to their homes, it's really understandable to me that more people would be looking to food as a source of comfort, especially because we can't have each other as a source of comfort. Like we can't. It's much more difficult
Yeah.
to go out and meet up with a friend, or to get our need for connection and touch and joy met in the usual social ways that we might. And so it's and in Chinese medicine, food produces the earth element in the body, and it's connected with the spleen and stomach, the digestive organs. The spleen and stomach being about the digestion of life, and also associated with the taste of sweet, and with the emotion of worry, but also kind of compassion, of our ability to be compassionate and empathetic. And it's like all of those things, and so at a time when we are grasping for some kind of ground to stand on, the earth element is often what we're drawn to, for sweetness, for comfort, for
Mhm.
solidness, to help us digest literally this crazy experience that we're all experiencing, this trauma really that we're all collectively undergoing. And so it makes sense that we would be leaning hard into the earth element, and actually kind of maybe to a fault. um
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what can people do to check themselves as to kind of like to not fall into an emotional eating pattern while we're under stress?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think everybody has I think people more than ever are getting hip to the idea, at least of stress eating, because I have friends who normally are like patting me on the back and saying, "That's so wonderful, the work you do with emotional eaters," having no idea that they are an emotional eater. like
Right,
no
right, with those people way over there.
Yeah, like no connection whatsoever to what I'm saying and how it relates to them. And now they're like, oh my God, like here I am eating everything. And now all of a sudden friends who, are thin and fit and, no connection to what I'm saying are like raising their hand, or like, I'm an emotional eater for sure. So, put us in a pandemic and all of a sudden see what happens. So,
Turns out we're all human, right?
exactly. And food is like the most comforting thing. It's the most accessible and the most just emotional. Like it just is. There's so many ties to us and in the way we live and the way we grew up and just in our sense of safety and security. So it's a packed issue for sure. And so, I mean, I really say, for people who have kind of gone down that rabbit hole and they want to come out of it, even I've had stress, I notice it's a little bit like food's a little bit harder for me right now. And I've been doing this for 30 years, this work. So I'm amazed at how this pandemic is really affecting everybody, but not surprised, but just amazed at how it's really getting into all of us in different ways. But I would say one of the first things I would recommend to people is really to get a routine around your eating. So it's not a free for all of, snacking all day at home, because, we do have stockpiles of food, we're staring a lot more food. I mean, I live in Los Angeles. I'm normally like going out to my favorite health food store for a salad or for some prepared food. So I don't even cook normally, and all of a sudden I've got a refrigerator full of food and I'm cooking and it's like my whole life, my eating life has changed too. And so I'd say get a routine around food. And I suggest something called 3 meal magic. And I coined that phrase because I really feel like it is magical. And in terms of what it can do for your eating routine, and that is to eat 3 meals a day with nothing in between. And, it's not for everybody, but what I find it's done for me and for my clients is make it really clear when it's time to eat and when it's not. And if you do this, and obviously you have to have your meals be substantial and satisfying with a proper nutrition and enjoyment. Make the meal count, put it on a plate, put care and love into it, eat it, enjoy it, do the dishes, and then close down the kitchen until next meal.
I really appreciate you saying that
Oh,
because
good.
one of the things that Chinese medicine and Ayurveda both speak to is this idea of that, well, first of all, that there has to be a balance between yin and yang in all the systems in the body. And so it's good to have an on and an off of eating, like that your digestive system needs time to clean itself out. And we need time to really that if our digestive system is one long tube from our mouth to our anus and the tube is always kind of like full,
Right.
it's not optimal, that it functions best
No.
when there is this pulsation. And in Chinese medicine we really like people to close the kitchen by 7 p.m. and enable
Mhm.
that 13 hours between dinner and breakfast, right? Like to really
Absolutely.
let ourselves get into deeper levels of metabolism. And the fact that we just, as animals, as mammals, like we don't digest the same during the day as we do at night. And so especially if this hits in the evening, it's like it's harder on the body when we're eating what at a time when literally we're not biologically set up to be. And so if we're eating a late dinner, for example, it's like that it's the surest way that we're going to turn those calories into extra weight is like they're going to become glycogen in the liver because we're not burning them off.
Yeah. And that time between, there's so many benefits of that time between meals. And for the purpose of my work, I recommend it because, I totally agree with you with the digestion and the rest, that your digestion gets, but, your whole body gets. But also regarding emotional eating is the time between meals will give you a chance to identify what your emotions are, because the idea of emotional eating is you're eating to anesthetize your emotions, to just put a blanket over anything that's uncomfortable. And
Yes.
that's why it gets us into trouble, because then when you have no ability or frame of reference for dealing with tough and uncomfortable emotions, then you have to eat all the time to make sure you're not feeling them. And so what I really try to get my clients to do is start feeling what's in between and what those emotions are, so you get an acquaintance with them, and then I obviously give tools for dealing with them in a constructive way. But that way, when you're more conversant with your emotions and they're not so scary, so you're not like daunted every time something comes up like fear or worry or anger, and you actually start to learn how to deal with them, then you don't, it's not a knee-jerk reaction where the moment you're uncomfortable, you're headed to the kitchen to eat and just quell those feelings.
I think that's such a good point. And especially like when the thing that is, yeah, like if you are in kind of a numbed out, disconnected from your emotional state, it's so easy to just throw something in your mouth without even realizing or appreciating the thing that you're eating. And so it's like, it's
Yep.
almost like you don't even get to enjoy it once, that there's that, I don't know, for me at least, it's like something that if I throw down a cookie in 2 bites that I barely register that I've had it. And then I feel guilty that I had it. Or, I feel like, oh yeah, that was clearly not something that was done in a conscious, savoring, mindful way. And
Right.
so therefore inconsistent with how I want to be living my life. So if someone is, for example, anxious or bored, like reasons that we might find ourselves in the kitchen, do you have a substitution behavior or like something that you suggest that people do instead so that they're not reaching for that bag of chips or whatever it is?
Absolutely. I mean, I will say I like to back people up into, I mean, there's things I can suggest in the moment, like change your state, get out of that emotional place, either by going for a walk or writing your feelings out, different things like that. But I will say when you're in the moment of wanting the food, craving the food, it's hard. If you're going toe to toe with a cookie, cookie might just win. So I always say, really let's back it up to the beginning of the day. And I call it putting money in the bank, where you make deposits, and you do that you make deposits that you can draw on later in the day when you are face to face with a cookie. So it's easier to make positive food choices if you have some stores to draw on. And that's what I mean by money in the bank. So what I recommend is a morning routine where you are getting still and quiet and connected to your deeper self, your spiritual self, your divine self. And I do this through meditation, through prayer, through spiritual readings or inspirational readings, walking, and walking. I call it my walk, pray. I put my earbuds in my ears and I walk and I talk to God. And I do these different things that can help me feel connected and grounded. And so if I've done that, if I start my day that way, instead of getting online, turning on the news, taking in negative messages and stress, if I start my day being peaceful and quiet and connected and aligned, those are deposits I'm making that will enable me to take withdrawals later when I'm filled with stress. The day's stress has piled up and I'm feeling kind of like discombobulated, or too many people needing something from me, and that's when people most likely are going to reach for chocolate or some quick form of energy, caffeine, something that can kind of bolster them. And we feel that way middle of the, afternoon, that kind of slump in energy. And that's 75% of emotional eaters are going to do most of their overeating from 4 o'clock on into the evening, because they are worn down and their willpower is like nothing. But if we've started our day really getting centered and getting just reminded of who we really are, we're not these roles that we play, we're actually divine beings. If we can draw on that strength and that sense of groundedness, it's going to be easier to make conscious choices around food and self-caring choices, and that's really the beautiful thing about that routine in the morning. So I always just really recommend that to people, as you got to develop some kind of morning routine and ritual that can feed your soul, because that's really what we're hungry for, is that soul food. But we have to give that to ourselves first.
This episode of A Healthy Curiosity is brought to you by the Coaching and Classes division at brodywelch.com. It's amazing to me how many times I get on the phone with a potential coaching client only to discover that they have no idea that I have a class on the basics of Chinese medicine, where you can learn about how to take care of your inner ecosystem through the lens of this totally different paradigm. That I also teach online Qigong classes, that I have meditations available, and that it's possible to hire me to just give you a sense of what you could be doing differently with your diet and lifestyle from my background in Chinese medicine, Qigong, meditation, Ayurveda, habit change, essential oils, yoga, and all the other tools that I have spent the last 20 years collecting. Classes, meditation, coaching, and telemedicine are all available at brodywelch.com, Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. And if you'd like to support the show, you're welcome to make a donation via PayPal. The address is brody@brodywelch.com. And of course, there's plenty of ways to support the show absolutely free that are also greatly appreciated. That could include telling a friend about your favorite episode, or taking a moment to write a review in whatever podcast app you use, or going into Apple Podcasts, searching for A Healthy Curiosity, and leaving a rating and review there. This show would not exist without your support, so thank you. I really appreciate what you're saying. I think morning routine is one of the most important things that we can do for our mental health and emotional health, as well as living in accordance with our priorities, our deepest priorities, because we get to set the tone for the day. We get to tap into what really matters, as you put it, just that making deposits in the bank and aligning with a bigger truth about who we are. And so if we
Yes.
do have a sense of the spiritual or a sense of trust in something, that being able to align with that early on in the day is huge. Plus, the word routine implies that it happens automatically, and that decreases decision fatigue, which helps us have more willpower. Right. Every
Yeah.
time we have to ping our brain and debate something like, am I going to exercise? Am I going to meditate? Am I going to get outside and take a walk? All of these things, that back and forth is wasted energy that by the end of the day, it's going to be really easy to sink into a less aligned choice, perhaps. And so just getting into the habit, like you're talking about, that okay, I eat 3 meals a day. I start my day on a note that feeds my soul and allows me to connect to something that really matters. It's like it's so important in terms of being able to, well, making it more likely that we're going to be making choices that we can feel good about.
Completely. I love that decision fatigue. That's so true. And I call it a non negotiable. Like my morning
Hmm.
routine is not negotiable. And I do meditate in the afternoon as well. Like when I have that slump, my body's ready for it. I've been meditating for many years now in the afternoon as well as the morning, just 20 minutes. And if people are scared off by meditation, you can do, a headspace or insight timer and have a guided meditation. And I just find that afternoon meditation is like so golden because I'm quite sure, I haven't done really deep research on this, but I'm quite sure I'll eat at least 200 calories less or fewer if at the dinner time, if I've taken that time, that break to restore, and regenerate my energy in a healthy way. And I see it all the time with my clients is when they put in that second meditation, what we're doing is we're unwinding in a healthy way, where normally we're in the kitchen just munching on chips, or dips or something that can just sort of pull, like we do it really to bring down the stress, that's hence stress eating.
Hmm.
So if we have a different way to bring down that stress, and meditation is, or just lighting a candle and like lying down on your bed for 10 minutes too, it's just that conscious way of really de-stressing, so that when we enter the kitchen later, we're not using food to sort of wind us down.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's meditation is a great form of restorative practice and rest.
Absolutely.
But really it could also be really anything that your soul wants to do, whether
Yeah.
that's just, whether that's nothing, giving yourself permission to sit down and read a book, read something trashy, like watch, do something that feels indulgent or that feels like you wouldn't necessarily give yourself permission to do. Because I at least, like, my view of that is that there can be this sense of, that especially for women, like food is rich desserts are couched as these decadent things, right? And like, what is more decadent for a woman than actually reclaiming her time to do exactly what she feels like doing, that has nothing to do with service for other people and
Mhm.
nothing to do with work?
Absolutely. No, it's self-care. I mean, it's just self-care, and we all deserve it. And people always think self-care is selfish, but our families get the best part of us when we've first taken time to care for ourselves.
Yeah, people, listeners of this show will be familiar with my refrain of that basically I consider it not self-care, but embodying self-respect.
Mhm.
How we really claim the fact that we give a shit about ourselves, and
Mhm.
treating ourselves as though we were people that we had the utmost respect for, and therefore granting ourselves freedoms to live our lives on our own terms as much as we can.
Yeah.
For people who might be good at the 3 meals a day thing, but eat way too much at those meals. Like would put myself in that
Mhm.
category. It's like buy beautiful organic local food as much as I possibly can, and I love making super healthy stuff. And a lot of times I'm eating way more than I need at those meals. And so how can I differentiate between whether I'm overeating because it's coming from an emotional place, or whether it's just what my body requires because I've worked out that day, or like
Mhm.
whatever else, what other legitimate demands my body might have for food.
Yeah, well, I'd say, because emotions are so high right now, it is like so common to be doing like padding our meals with a little bit of extra. And it's just really born out of those emotions of fear and, an unconscious fear. Like we might be feeling okay and we might be okay and not in, COVID's way so much and might have money in the bank. So there's not any real danger to us. But the fact that all our lives are in upheaval right now and there's so much uncertainty and we don't know what really when we're going back to normalcy or what normalcy is even going to look like, because it's probably not going to be the way it was. I think that's causing people to just feel that sort of impulse to just get a little more, like a little more padding, a little bit more comfort. And I think sometimes what helps is what I offer people is a way to identify what's going on. And there's three in my research, there's three primary emotions. Like there's three kind of most prominent emotions that drive emotional eating. And it's very unconscious. It's not anything we're aware of, but I'm going to bring this up so that we are more aware. And I call it the PEP test. And PEP is an acronym. And I tell people, take the PEP test. If you're feeling like, I just need more food, like pause and take the PEP test. And so PEP is a way of describing the primary reasons why we use food in a emotional way. So the first P stands for painkiller. So food is an amazing anesthetic. Okay. So, and for pain, like emotional pain. And I would say right now, we all have some level of emotional pain. Like you said early on, trauma, this is a traumatic experience for every person alive right now, because it's changed us, and it's not something we ordered, or
Right.
we might have psychically ordered it, but we certainly didn't consciously order it. So here we are, we're in emotional pain. We have scary things on the news that we're seeing. We might have loved ones who have gotten sick, and that's scary, or perhaps even died. So food, it kills pain. It just does. That's why we love sugar and carbs and ooey gooey chewy things, because it just soothes our pain. It gives us a hit of serotonin and sense of calm. And so that's the first reason why we might be padding and doing a little extra eating. The E stands for escape. And I can't think of a time more than ever that we might want to escape, our reality. I mean, it is such a bizarre reality right now. And we're 8 weeks into this thing, and I still sometimes kind of shake my head. I'm like, wait, what? Like, we're having a pandemic? Like this is so weird,
What is happening?
I can't believe it. And so it's just so bizarre. And so oftentimes just that low grade anxiety that people are feeling, that fear, that's a main driver of overeating in comfort eating is just anxiety and fear. So that's something, is we want to escape our reality. And the third letter in the PEP test is punishment. And this might not be as much at play here in this particular situation of the pandemic, but oftentimes it's a big driver for people who do chronically overeat. And punishment doesn't seem like something we use food for, because we think of food as a reward, so it's like, what? Like I love to eat. What are you talking about? But for people who go overboard, which was me, I was totally food addicted, and I would go overboard and have these massive binges in front of the TV where I would end up feeling sick and stuffed, and I'd kind of feel gross about myself. And I might have even thrown the food out and then gotten it later thinking, well, I have some more room to eat. I don't want all those cookies to go to waste. So I get it out of the trash, and I feel mortified that I've done that. We do bizarre things when we're in our addiction. So, why would somebody put themselves through that kind of pain and embarrassment and shame? And it's because of an underlying sense of guilt, and we might have been conditioned to feel guilty or feel like we were bad, from our childhood and perhaps messages we got, or maybe because we've been afraid and, sort of living not our best selves, more in darkness when we're in this cycle of overeating. Perhaps we've been selfish, or perhaps we've had mean thoughts or whatever. And emotional eaters, I find, are very sensitive. Like, we're more sensitive than your average person. So we feel guilty really easily. And so we beat the crap out of ourselves. And these binges are perfect ways to beat ourselves up, because not only is the food beating us up, but then the self-recrimination after. Why did I do that? What's wrong with me? I'm so lazy. I'm so I'm a slob, I have no control, I'm a loser. I mean, all the things, all the diets that have failed, that we've failed at, we feel like a failure. So that's where that guilt stuff is generated through our eating behaviors. So the point is that when we are feeling like we're eating too much or our pants are getting tight, or we're in that craving mode of I gotta have something, just stopping and saying, what's really going on? Like, what's driving this? And then think of that pep test. Am I needing a painkiller and am I needing an escape, or am I dogging myself, like really down on myself about something, and I'm about to go into this cycle of punishment, and that can really help people kind of tap into some of the deeper emotions that are driving what seems like just a desire for chocolate, but really it's always deeper.
And so I love that you have a way for people to identify what's going on. It's things to consider, whether it's coming from punishment, escape, or desire to alleviate pain. If someone is like, "Oh, yeah, totally, I'm wanting to escape. That's what's going on." What do we do instead?
So I talked about earlier changing our state, and that is really helpful because we're not thinking clearly. When we're in those emotions, we're not thinking clearly, and we're not going to make good choices or even be able to stop ourselves. And so,
It can feel like a
some,
trance almost. Like,
oh,
I find myself in the kitchen
yes.
and I'm like, "What am I doing? I feel like a zombie." Like, just yeah,
Yes,
anyway.
possessed, absolutely possessed. No question about it. It is a crazy thing. But getting out of the house, like literally removing ourselves from the kitchen can be so helpful. Like I find walking to be such a beautiful state changer. Just a 10-minute walk around the block with your earbuds in, maybe some of your favorite music on Pandora, Spotify, or picking up the phone and calling somebody and either outing yourself, like I was just about to eat a bag of chips, or I was just about to dig into the ice cream. Outing yourself to somebody who would understand, is a way, or not outing yourself and just kind of getting into somebody else's like stuff, like what's going on, how are you feeling? And just when we start thinking about somebody else and what might be going on with them, we get out of our head and in that terrible obsessive place. And that can be helpful. Sometimes just doing something like you talked about, something that brings us pleasure, art or music or reading or something like that can be helpful.
Do you recommend that people try to meet the need that they're trying to fill with food? Like if the need is for escape, that maybe taking a walk is a great idea, and if the need is for comfort, then calling a friend who's comforting, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because it is a deeper need, and escape is not a bad thing right now. I mean, I work really hard each day, but I look forward to the end of the day when my boyfriend and I watch our favorite TV show. I'm doing that. I'm like, that's the carrot at the end of the stick for me, because it gives me an escape that I feel like I need. And I feel like we all need an escape. Like escaping is not bad. It's just escaping, and food has a lot of negative side effects. Whereas, escaping in a good TV show, I mean, there's so much good TV out nowadays. So I just feel like that's great. So long as you're not doing it all day long, because that of course has its own ramifications. If we're
Right. If you're
just
numbing constantly, then you're not actually dealing
completely,
with life. But there is a difference
yeah,
between like a healthy distraction
yes,
versus like staying there. Like, and
yeah,
I think it's easy to feel that when it's
yeah,
overdone. Like,
yeah.
I think we all know what the Netflix hangover feels like.
Yes,
Done it too much.
absolutely. Yeah, one episode, two episodes tops, and then call it a night,
Absolutely. And I'm curious in your life, like I know that you mentioned kind of like that you've been doing this work for decades, and yet this time is so unusual that it's challenging you as well. I'm curious if there's something that you've been doing of late that's been particularly useful for you.
Let me see. I've been given flowers a couple times, actually from our landlord. I could not believe it. They just delivered flowers to their tenants yesterday in a vase with a note. And so I have these beautiful flowers at my place. And I also have bought flowers at the store as of late as well. So just making something visually beautiful at my house has been really helpful to me. Connect, like making a real point to connect to really connect with my partner has been really helpful, so because we can be like ships passing in the night, even if we're quarantined.
Mhm.
It's easy to be busy. We both have businesses, so it's easy to be busy, 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 but
Right. Time
making that
around each other is different than quality time together.
completely. So really checking in, like really talking, like really being present with the other person and really hearing what's going on for them and like how their day is. That has been really helpful. I mean, and these are things that I should be doing all the time, which I try to, but I just mean I'm more intentional right now. So like my prayer time is more intentional because I'm like really needing support. Like, so I'm not like, God, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, God.
There's a
like,
different tone
oh,
involved.
yeah. Like, hello, God. Like, this is important. Like, I really need help on this, because there's been days when I've
Mhm.
just been emotionally like, OMG, like, I do not know how to get through this. And so that's been really important for me as well. But I've had troubles. Like I usually go to this wonderful class, exercise class when I'm in LA and I'm out and about, more normal life when we can go out. And I have this class and they started doing the class online, on Instagram. And it's so great that they're doing online and I can attend live, but I don't have the same get up and go as I have when I'm in a physical room with other people where I can't leave.
Yes. Mhm.
So when I'm at home, there's a temptation to poop out. And so it's been harder for me to do that. So I just, walking's always my go-to. And so walking and also connecting with family, that good old, heart to heart connection and community. I went for a walk yesterday with my sister. She was literally taking a meditation class in her earbuds, like online. And I was on a group call with some other people that I connect with. And so we didn't even talk. We just walked by each other with some distance between us, but we walked. It was an evening, like it was like 8 p.m. We did a walk together. And just that was so comforting to me, even though we had our own things that we were doing. That connection and community is, I mean, I need it more than ever. And I think we all do,
Yeah.
and I think we're paying attention more to our need for it and to make sure we get it. Cause otherwise the mental health, man, it goes down in a hurry.
Yes. Well, and again, we comes back to earth element, spleen, stomach it's about connection. It's about our social connection. It's like that earth element, like Mother Earth, that supports all life and is literally the ecosystem that being connected to our the ties that sustain us in our lives, that which makes us feel connected is super
Absolutely.
important. I understand that you have some resources for our listeners available. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did. When this whole thing struck, I just, I felt helpless and I'm like, what can I do to serve? And plus then all these friends were telling me they're emotionally eating when they normally don't. And so one night it just popped into my head, this statement of don't eat the house. And so I created this Don't Eat the House series of classes to address all the different things that are going on for people at home around, their food behaviors and just their mental health behaviors and just their sense of sanity. So I did these little mini classes. And then I created worksheets and quizzes and assessments that go along with each class. I mean, one thing for each class that kind of help people tap into the stuff they're going through. And these are things that can help you if you want to eat clean, but your spouse or your partner doesn't want to, like, what do you do about that? What do you do about, when you're feeling stir crazy? So I have this checklist of like 30 stir crazy strategies. And then what to do about this, how to stop overeating if the food's calling to you that's stockpiled. So a lot of different things. I go deep dive into these different topics. And so it's a free resource. I put it all together just in a package where people can opt in for it and then get all 5 classes and all the cheat sheets and the assessments along with it. So, and you just go to don'teatthehouse.com without the apostrophe, just spell out literally don'teatthehouse.com and you can access that.
And we'll make sure that is in the show notes over at brodywelch.com as well. Tricia, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I think it's really helpful for us all to know that we're not alone if we're engaging in stress eating and to know what we can do
Totally.
instead. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Brody, and for your amazing work that you do. I've learned a lot just being on the show with you today.
Thanks for listening today. To check out the show notes, get on my email list, or drop me a line, head to brodywelch.com. That's Brody with an IE and Welch with a CH. I'd love to hear from you. If you learned something new or feel inspired to try something different in your life, I'd love for you to pay it forward by sharing this episode with a friend who you think could also benefit and give them a reason to listen. You'll be helping to create a world where we encourage each other to embody self-respect. Till next time, be good to yourself.